Hey everybody, I'm going to show you today how you can use the PD++ C++ library in Unreal via Metasounds. So first thing we're going to do is just create a new game project. It doesn't matter which one you choose, you could choose a blank one. We're going to choose third person, and then we're going to select C++. That just makes our life easier when we do that, and we're going to call this whatever you want. Actually, let's call it PD tutorial. And it's going to create the project and an Xcode project as well. And we're going to dig into what all of that is going to mean. You can also use this library in Unity, which I will make a separate tutorial on how to do that as well. And it's a little bit easier to use in Unity. While it's generating all of the stuff, I'll just kind of talk quickly about, if you're not familiar with what PD++ is. It is basically all of the DSP objects of pure data taken out of pure data and just put into C++ classes. And so it's basically I ripped out all of the DSP code and put it into a C++ library that can be used in basically anything. I've put in Java bindings, so it can be used with processing in any other Java application, and C# bindings, so it can be used in Unity, Godot, or anything else with C#, C++, Java, and even Python. If you really, really want to use it in Python, you could do that, but I am not going to show you how to do that today. All right, so this is our project, and there's nothing in it right now. So the next thing we have to do is create a plugin. So if you go to Edit, this is where you can add plugins. There's all sorts of plugins for Unreal. We don't need any of these. At least we're going to assume that you want to make your own plugin based on what you've done with PD or coding in the past. We're going to make a blank plugin. We'll call this plugin PD test, and then just put your name. And you could put a little description, and that's about all you need. Create the plugin, and it should now be basically creating a new folder in your Xcode project that will be where we put our plugin code. And we'll go over that in a second once it's all done. It only takes like a second. It's really not much code that it generates, so you can close the windows. Oh, it's still generating more project files. Okay, there we go. So now this is the, oh great, exactly. That's exactly what we love. When things close, we're going to close without sending. All right, well that's great. So I'm going to relaunch Unreal. You'll understand why I have a project named Disaster, because this was really tricky to get to work the first time through. So it's basically under games, because we created a C++ project. It has both our editor and our game and our plugin code kind of all in one. And so if you've done anything in C++ and Unreal before, you kind of know that side of things, which is kind of like you're just scripting things in your engine using the C++ API. For this, we're making a plugin, which is in its own folder. It all gets kind of built at the same time. So if you have an error anywhere, it will break your compiler. But I think for this part, we shouldn't have any problems. And let's just go here, reopen PD tutorial, and let's just let that work in the background. So here is our source. So it's under game, under plugin, and then under our name. And the resource is just a picture. It's an icon. You could change that if you wanted to. We don't really need to change that. And here's where our code exists. So there's only two files basically your input file. This is your startup file. Basically, this is kind of like the constructor for the plugin as a whole, if you've never made a plugin before. First thing we have to do is we have to tell this U plugin, which is just basically metadata for your plugin, to load Metasounds as a plugin. So if it doesn't do that, then you won't be able to actually probably find your plugin. So on my GitHub, I have a really starter kind of page. This is the PD Unreal. My GitHub is github.com/Robert Essler, my name. And I just kind of put this here so that you would at least know how to get started. You just copy this into your plugin file, your U plugin file. And basically this is Metasound Node Programming 101. This has to be there. Okay, we're done with that. The next thing we have to remember to do is this build file, which is ironically a C# file. And Unity uses C#, so I find that ironic that they also use C# in Unreal. And we need to load modules that we're going to use. And this is something that the tutorial online doesn't do a very good job of. In fact, it was really frustrating because unless you're really up to the Unreal ecosystem, it's hard to understand the way that they're working. So these are modules which are basically they're API header files that it loads. So you don't have to do that kind of search header files thing in your Xcode project because it won't work anyway. So we're going to need the Metasound engine, and we're just going to separate all these with commas. We're going to need the Metasound, got to spell it right, Metasound front end, and Metasound graph core. Whoops. And last one, Metasound standard nodes. And then we're done. So this basically will load all of the H files we need to run our plugin. Okay. Now we need to, this will load our plugin. Once we're going to create a new C++ file in just a second. But in order for Unreal to see your node when you load Metasounds, you have to do this part here. Again, the online tutorial doesn't tell you have to do this. It says you shouldn't need to, but you do, in my experience with this very frustrating environment. So it's front-end registries.h. You need to load that, and then you put this line of code here. And I found with Xcode, it does not load the API with autocomplete. I don't know what I need to do to Xcode to get that to happen. It does work in Visual Studio and Windows very well for me, but Metasound front end registries container. That's the name of whatever the identifier is, get. And then this is another member here, register pending nodes. Okay, so you saw like the Xcode autocomplete doesn't show up. So that's really frustrating. Now we should be ready to create a dummy node. And so we're just going to do it in just a regular C++ file. You could make an H file and a C++ file if you like to do that. I think it's a little bit unnecessary. So we're just going to call this PD dummy. I'm not calling you a dummy. I'm calling this plugin a dummy because it's basically filling in for our template code. Okay, and I have a dummy plugin here in the repository under private. It's called, what do you know, PD dummy. And we're just going to copy it raw and paste it. And it might throw some errors. And generally speaking, again, frustrating part of Xcode, these errors should not matter when we hit compile. All right, so what we're going to do now, this should be everything that we need to do. We just need to hit build and cross our fingers that nothing breaks, that we didn't do something wrong. And if we do, we'll just deal with it, because that's what we do as creative coders. So give it a second, and when you start seeing it building, like the actual binaries, you're probably in good shape. This is the stage where you start to sweat a little bit, and yeah, so it's fun. This is really fun. Fun stuff here, fun stuff. Metasound, that couldn't find that, and it couldn't find that. F Metasound front end registries container. All right, that's fun. This is fun. Fun, 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 fun. And it didn't find Metasound executable operator. Yeah, should have. All right, let's double check. Test build. So we got that. All of that's in there. Did we do that correctly? That's correct. It would have definitely told us if we didn't do that correct. Let's just check and see if I did that correct here. I have an example of that in here. Should be, I might have spelled something wrong, so let's just copy that and make sure that that's the correct code. And it looks like it's the same. Yeah. Oh, it was the same. All right. Fun. Fun, fun, fun. Let me see if there's anything else I have to do. Nope. Pretty sure that should do it. One more time. Just didn't find that one. That means it didn't find anything. Just never good. Let's try to build it one more time. And sometimes, well, it worked. So it did build. Still throwing that error. Folks, I don't know. This is what I've had the issue with. After I go, now assuming everything is successful, I'm going to show you an error I had that I had to fix that was undocumented. All right, now the only way you can get it to build the binary that I'm aware of, because the Unreal Builder tool doesn't actually do this. It says it did it, but it doesn't. You have to now hit compile, and it does this little, like, you know, CSI compiling C++ code, and then it takes about 30 seconds depending on how much code you have. And then it should give you a check saying complete. Now it's built the binaries. And Unreal should be able to see those binaries when it loads the Metasound nodes. So Metasounds will load its own nodes, and then it will look for any plugins that are labeled Metasound nodes, and then it will load those in the project. So as you make your nodes, you're going to have to do this every single time. It's a little frustrating. I can't say that there's one game engine or middleware that's less frustrating than the other. They all have their little peccadillos that drive you crazy. But this one, Unreal is probably the one that I think is the least well documented. And if you work for Unreal and that's your job, you can contact me, because I'd love to tell you all the issues I've had with your documentation. It's just not, if you're coming from a different ecosystem, it is really frustrating to understand how you're working. Okay, so that now built the binaries, and here's the fun thing is that it's not going to be there. And I'll tell you why in a second. So let's just make a Metasound source. So this is how Metasounds are basically programmed. They look like blueprints, and so we're just going to call this our PD tutorial. And okay, so let's just see if it's there. We're going to write dummy. Okay, so it's not there. And you're like, well, PD, no. It's called dummy, so it should show up as dummy. It's not there. All right, well, that's frustrating. Well, it turns out in order for you to load those nodes, it doesn't hot swap you have to quit the engine and start again. Now that's not like the worst behavior in the world, but it would be nice if they told you that's what you need to do, because not all, it's basically a dynamic library. That doesn't always, the case that you have to quit a program and reload it. There are ways you can load dynamic libraries on the fly during runtime, but just not right now. Maybe this was behavior before, maybe this is new behavior, but now it should be there. And we're going to go open up our tutorial, and it's registering new nodes. Hopefully then it saw the new binary, loaded it into memory, and there it is. All right, there's our dummy node. Okay, so all this does, I'll show you in the code, is it has an input and two variables, and then an output. So these here, and I'm not going to go through the Metasound like API with you. I'm just, you can look into the code and do that, but that's all that we have. And then in the execute, where is it? This is where all your DSP goes. I'm just basically taking the input buffer, writing to the output buffer. So whatever comes in should come out right the same. And then right here is where our inputs would go. They do nothing. So they're just numbers that then fly off into the ether. But there are some examples on my GitHub that will show you how to do that. So if we take a sine wave, we should be able to just go right in and right back out. And that, yay, that worked. Okay, so it's a working node, and you can look at the other nodes I made. Anything with the PD in front of it is the node. So fire, not master, and plugin. Those are the two that are kind of special. PD rain, and then I made cricket. So fire, cricket, and rain. Those are the three that I made from my PD++ library. There's more to it than that, but you could easily just copy and paste those in and get a working rain plugin if you wanted one. All right, so that's it. That's how you get your node to work. One last thing I want to note is in the engine API, it's here. I'm going to show you plugins, runtime. I'm going to show you an issue I had with at least one. So it was with this H file. And I'll show you what I had to do. So it's under Metasound sources, and that one is, there it is. I was close, I just didn't scroll all the way down. Okay, so Metasounds has this namespace called Metasound everywhere, wrapped around everything they've done. And this is a preprocessor directive, like a define, which then boils into a function, which already it hard codes into it a namespace declaration. So what Xcode did was it says you've basically defined the namespace twice and through an error. I couldn't compile. So I had to comment out the namespace, and then it worked. And then it happens again in several different files, this declare Metasound data reference types, which is basically a way of declaring, I believe it is the types that we're using for the input and output. So like these float read references and stuff like that, those are what they're doing here. They're wrapping them into Metasound types that are basically pointers. They're kind of like a data structure that can reference the address and other properties of the memory that you would need during runtime. And that's just an API thing, but it did not work. It works in Windows as is. I didn't have to change anything in Windows, and I tried every single thing I could. Usually there's a way around stuff like that with warnings and pragmas and all that stuff, and I could not find a way to do it other than just refactoring their code. And that was really frustrating because it's like you should never have to refactor an API code. but I did, and it worked, and it works fine, and there's like nothing crashes, there's no problems. It's just something I had to do on Mac. So I wanted to point that out. If you see this issue, you have to comment out the Metasound namespace, or you have to copy in some other files. I had to copy this declaration outside of the namespace and then kind of refactor some of the namespaces that are being referenced. It was a mess, and I'm not going to take you through it step by step. I do have some notes about it in the GitHub that you can look at if you find that this happens to you. It might be something that Unreal's unaware of. It's maybe something that I'm doing that's stupid. I really don't know. But that is everything that you need to know about getting C++, my PD++ library to work with Unreal, or any C++ code to work with Unreal. I will show you in another video soon how you can then take some of my examples in processing and use them in like Unity or Unreal, and how you would be able to go back and forth very quickly, test out stuff in processing, and then quickly convert it into something for your game engine or middleware. So that is everything. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.